Okay, let's move to the first unit of this module, the unit about levels of learning, 2 levels of learning. This is a major distinction which runs throughout the whole module and is relevant for all we are going to talk about. Try to clearly understand this particular distinction. We are first talking about rote learning versus understanding, and then we focus on concrete experience as the basis of learning. First, the distinction. This distinction was originally made by Bransford and Johnson and also Craig and Lockhart, so back in the 70s, and it has to do with, let's say, 2 levels of learning, basically. The first level is, you might call the sort of surface level, which is called rote learning, learning things by heart, memorizing things, things like facts, images which you want to store in your head, but also skills, so things you want to practice and then do automatically, like, you know, cycling, swimming, playing the piano, playing the violin, etc. So these kind of things are learned by practicing, by doing things repeatedly, rote learning. The deep level of learning has to do with understanding, with relating what you encounter as new information in your environment with what's already stored in your head, with existing knowledge. So new information is let's say, integrated into what you already know. There is a sort of network, you know, of nodes, and this network is extended, or links are made between all kinds of nodes which already exist. So the network may have an increased density of relations, etc. So keep that in mind. Understanding, we are talking about concepts, you know, the concept table or the concept liberty, theories about learning, for instance, or strategies, things you plan to do, like writing a paper or planning a project, steps which you carry out step by step, consecutively and purposefully and deliberately. So that is what we call a strategy. Okay, so here we have this major distinction between the surface level and the deep level, between rote learning and understanding. Now we take the second step, and that is the discussion about, the question whether concrete experience is necessary as a basis for learning. First, I would like to elaborate a little bit on the concept of levels of processing, as it was done in a particular experiment by Bransford and Johnson back in 1972. The experiment is very simple. We have 2 groups of students, 2 groups of participants, let's say, and the 2 groups get a text in front of them, and they have to read this text, try to rehearse it, try to learn the content of the text, and after that there will be a test in which you have to tell as much as possible or write down as much as possible about the text you just read and learned by heart, so to speak. So it's what we call a free recall test, a free recall task, in which you just produce everything you can remember about the text. Now, I'm reading the text for you, and please listen to me and read the text with me and try to understand as much as possible. If the balloons popped, the sound wouldn't be able to carry, since everything would be too far away from the correct floor. A closed window would also prevent the sound from carrying, since most buildings tend to be well insulated. Since the whole operation depends on a steady flow of electricity, a break in the middle of the wire would also cause problems. Of course, the fellow could shout, but the human voice is not loud enough to carry that far. An additional problem is that a string could break on the instrument. Then there could be no accompaniment to the message. It is clear that the best situation would involve less distance. Then there would be fewer potential problems. With face-to-face contact, the least of the number of things could go wrong. Okay, I pause for a few seconds to help you to study the text. Okay, well, now imagine that you have to write down as much as you can remember from this particular text. That is quite a heavy task because there are so many, concepts which completely seem unrelated. The correct floor, there's something like a building with floors. There are windows in the building which are well insulated, so sounds cannot carry through the windows. There is something like a height which has to be surpassed, so to speak. So there's electricity, a break in a wire. The fellow could shout, and then there's the distance. So the voice doesn't carry to that far, etc. And then there's also an instrument with strings, perhaps a guitar or a violin or whatever. And, well, this is a difficult situation. So it's not easy to try to remember as much as you can from this particular text. Now imagine there's a group which has just performed this task as I describe it. And then there is another group which also reads the text, but then this group gets extra information. And this extra information is a picture, which I'm going to show you now. Here you see a person, a man, singing through a microphone, playing his guitar, and the sound box is just hanging in the air through balloons and is connected through a wire with the microphone, and the lady who hears the music is well pleased by this lover, apparently a lover who is making a serenade. Okay, that's the whole story. It's a serenade, but not a serenade for some nice woman, on the first floor of a very romantic house, but she's leaning out of the window of an apartment house and on the top floor. So that's the reason why he has made this kind of arrangement. Okay, now if you have this picture in mind and you still have to recall as much as possible from the text, I can imagine that it is a lot easier because you have the picture which organizes everything. So now here you see the difference between learning by heart without organization, without an organizing picture, and learning by understanding, by using the picture to connect, to relate all separate, pieces of information in the text. If you see this difference, then you understand what the difference is between rote learning and deep learning. Okay? So now we proceed to the next question. I already announced, is experience a necessary basis for understanding? Well, as far as rote learning is concerned, well, experience is, of course, important, but then it's part of the rehearsal phase of learning, in which you really try to learn by heart the pieces of information you have to recollect and reproduce in a test situation. So if we make a distinction between the learning environment and the test environment, then it is a matter of practicing in the learning environment in order to be able to produce the fact or the image or the skill in the test environment. So experience, yes, experience as far as it is practice. But how about understanding? Is it necessary to experience a particular, let's say, concept or a theory in order to be able to use the concept or theory? For instance, the concept of table. Do you need to experience, so to speak, to observe or to interact with all kinds of tables in order to understand what a table is? Or is it possible that somebody simply tells you, okay, a table, it's some sort of surface at a certain height, supported by piles or whatever, or one particular pile in the middle, and the table is used, to put things on and to work on and to arrange things on the table, etc., etc. So a table is a help for somebody who is sitting in a chair, and then the table has to have a certain height and has to have a certain, let's say, surface in order to be able to put things on it. So is it possible that somebody just explains to you, this is a table? For instance, you go to the planet Mars and there they have tables, you've never seen a table, and then one of these fellows there on the planet explains to you, are you going to see in a few minutes an object, we call a table, and it has this and this characteristics, and it is used for these purposes. Is that possible? Okay, now that's the question. Well, as you may remember from the first module on perspectives on learning and instruction, Plato had the idea that people are born with innate ideas and that learning is a matter of recollection, so that you simply have to recollect a particular concept in order to be able to use it. So there may be some sort of ideal table stored in your head, and the teacher or somebody who is your parents or whoever is explaining to you, okay, now we are going to talk about tables. A table is something like a surface with piles and etc., etc. And then you say, oh yeah, of course, the table. I have the ideal table in my head, and you are referring to that particular concept, and I'm going to use it. So then there is a sort of direct explanation. That may be possible. There are other scholars, philosophers, as we have seen, who think that this is exactly not possible. You have to experience a table in order to be able to use the concept of a table. People like Aristotle or Dewey, and also many current researchers and scholars. So they say basically that a concept is sort of program you have in mind, a program which helps you to distinguish between objects which do belong to the category of tables and objects which do not belong to the category of tables. And this program is gradually developed through experience, through interacting with tables and non-tables, and gradually making a distinction. It's a bit like, the toddler who sees a cat in the room and learns to call this particular animal a cat, with the fur and with the sound and everything. And then all of a sudden there is a dog, and the child also calls this particular dog a cat because it does, resemble the cat the child has in mind. But then people are explaining to the child, no, this is a dog, it barks, and it has a different fur, etc., and different characteristics, etc. And gradually, by labeling and by perceptually discriminating between the various animals, that the child learns to make a distinction between the cat and the dog. It's not a matter of definitions; it is a matter of feedback and labeling and explanation. Yes, but through experience. Feedback on experience. Okay. Okay, these are the various positions described by authors like Plato and Aristotle. We're not going to make a decision about who's right and who's wrong, but it's just a matter of presenting the issues which may help you to get a feeling for the problems related to making a distinction between rote learning and understanding as learning processes. So we have discussed now this issue of concrete experience as the basis of learning, and that was the second question, in our unit on 2 levels of learning.